Okay, so let's talk through some of the programming changes that I have made since my last comp, which obviously did not go to plan. Now, this block was already written out before comp happened. I could already tell what I needed to address and change up before I even did that comp. And obviously the comp didn't go to plan, which kind of reinforced that I needed to make these changes. So one of the big reasons I'm making quite a few changes to my training is because I was so burnt out going into comp. So I am self-coached. I've been self-coached literally my entire powerlifting career. I kind of got to a point recently where I was more seriously considering reaching out to people and hiring them, especially as I was feeling so burnt out. But with back-to-back comps, so I've got 7 weeks between my two comps. I'm currently like 4.5, 5 weeks out as I'm filming this, because I'm filming this way later than planned. But I was essentially thinking to myself, maybe it is time to just hand the reins over to someone else. It will kind of create a bit more excitement going into training. It'll be something a little bit different. And also, as I'm getting busier as a coach, I'm definitely finding it very difficult to prioritize my own lifting now. But one kind of change I am making to help me address that is I'm actually writing up my training blocks properly on my sheets that I use with my clients, because previously all I would do is I would go on my phone, I would go on my notes section, and I would literally just write out the structure of my week, where I want to end each block, roughly where I'm going to start each block, and I would just do it all from memory over the whole block. And that was fine to an extent because my blocks hardly changed over the last probably like 2 years at this point, and it's been working. Like, I very much am, if it's not broke, you don't need to change it, or you don't need to fix it. That was the wrong saying. And what I was doing was working. Like, I've had a really good trajectory. Like, I've been in this sport a long time. My total is continuously going up. The total I just put up was absolutely not reflective of my actual strength. Like, my strength was down. It wasn't a good meet at all. But I know for a fact I'm the strongest I've ever been. But what I'm doing with my sheets as well, so there is a section on my sheets where I get my clients to kind of write notes on how the session went. Obviously, they also communicate with me through WhatsApp, and we'll go into detail on there. But what this allows people to do is they put all their notes on the sheet next to each individual session. And then at the end of the block, they also do a little bit of a block review, and I can then see what's gone well, what's not gone well, what we could potentially try changing. And it allows me to analyze their training in a much more in-depth way. So I'm now doing that with myself rather than just kind of winging it, which sounds really bad. But at the same time, I've made it this far winging it. So let's see what happens going forward with actual structured training blocks that I'm writing out properly. But yeah, so I think that small change there will actually make quite a big difference. And also it's quite nice having everything on my phone. Like, previously I'd write stuff in my diary and write each session on the day, but like, I would much rather have it on my phone, because also I realized if I do decide to hire someone and they say, right, send me over your previous training blocks, I'd have to write them up for them because I literally don't have a log of them anywhere. So yeah, that's one slight change. I'm going to break it down into each individual lift, and we're mostly going to talk programming changes, to be honest. And one thing about me and all of my content is I want it to be the most easily digestible content there is. So I'm not going to talk in anything too complex. I'm not going to go into crazy detail. I'm just going to kind of tell you what I've changed and reasons why in the most simple terms I can. So if you want anything in more detail, or if you want a more in-depth breakdown of each individual lift or anything like that, do let me know in the comments down below. But I'm hoping I'll answer most questions anyway and kind of go through things in enough detail to cover that. But like I say, leave a comment down below if there's anything you think I've missed or you want more info on, and I will absolutely include that in future videos or any other content that I put out. So, starting with squats. Now, squats have been my child for the last few years. Like, my squat has really blown up the last couple of years, and a lot of that is definitely confidence. And I think I've lacked that recently, to be fair, but my bench has always been decent, but my squat has definitely come a long way the last couple of years. I am officially out squatting my pull regularly now, which is not good, but we'll get to deadlifts in a moment. So with my squats, the things I felt like I needed to address. So firstly, I think I just needed a change. Like, mentally, I was not really enjoying my structure anymore. My previous structure was on a Tuesday. My secondary squat day would be like a higher volume day, with my top set still being a relatively high intensity. And then on a Saturday would be my primary squat day, which would be a slightly lower rep scheme, but still higher intensity, obviously, as it's my primary day. But one thing I did have to kind of do that I've noticed, and I've definitely played around with enough to know this works for me, is I have to have a relatively high intensity top set on both days. Like, I need to have a relatively high intensity on my secondary day in order for my primary day to show up. And I do think a big part of that is just mental, but it's worked for me. I've trialed tapering that secondary day a little bit more in the final weeks of the block and things like that, and it just doesn't really work for me. However, I couldn't keep pushing volume sets on that secondary day, especially as I'm getting stronger and the absolute load that I'm lifting is that much more. I felt like my body just wasn't really able to cope with it. And to be honest, more than that, I think mentally I wasn't able to. Like, I am a pretty firm believer that my body is pretty robust. Like anything, any kind of training approach I see anyone do, like even Agata Shitko, 6-7 day a week SPD, I'm like, I could do that. My body's fine, I could cope with that. Probably couldn't, but I still like to think that I could. So anyway, that was one thing with squats, is mentally I just needed a bit of a change with my programming style. But I knew that I needed to keep that higher intensity exposure on my secondary day. So before I go into exactly what I've done on that secondary day, I've also got Zuko chewing my chair. Before I go through what I've done on that secondary day, I would also like to say the other things that I was noticing were a bit of a weakness in the bottom position of my squat, like as I was leaving the hole. Now, my rigs definitely allow me to cover up that weakness, so it's not something that's obvious within my lifting, but I've essentially become too reliant on my rigs. Like my legs are not as strong as they should be because I've become so reliant on my rigs, which when the knee sleeve ban came in, that's when I actually became more aware of that. Now, obviously the ban has been lifted, although I do think at the end of 2026, it's quite likely that rigs aren't going to be allowed or stiff sleeves aren't going to be allowed anyway. But I obviously don't ever want to rely simply on my knee sleeves. And so that's a bit of a big weak area. So it's essentially like, the easiest way to describe it is around my knees, kind of bottom of my quads, I've just noticed a weakness. I even noticed it in my day-to-day life. And I was saying this to my boyfriend recently, like when I try and get up off the floor and I like lunge up off the floor, I can feel this weakness. Like it feels difficult to get up, which I'm not heavy enough for that to be a thing, and it never used to be a thing either. So it's definitely a recent kind of change and thing that I've noticed that I wanted to address. And I feel like with my squat, I've had a lot less consistency in my movement pattern, but also confidence in my movement pattern. And I feel like there's been a lot more dive bombing and things. And I think part of that is fear of squatting high in comp, because people were kind of making jokes about my depth, which I think my depth was actually fine all along, but it really got in my head. And I think to compensate for that, I was essentially just dive bombing. So a few changes I've implemented. Firstly, I'm squatting back in heels. I kind of just jokingly tried them a few weeks before my last comp, so the powering through comp that I just did. I remember picking up loads of my training kit from my parents' house that was kind of still in their garage. I think I picked up my softer knee sleeves, my SPD ones, and just stuff like that. And I realised my squat shoes were there. So I brought them home with me. I put everything in the gym here, the garage here. And I was like, I'm just going to try them at 70 and just see what they feel like. And they felt really good. Like the heels felt really, really good. I obviously wasn't going to change. I think this when I was like 3 or 4 weeks out from comp, but I was like, actually, maybe down the line I do go back into heels, because historically in my powerlifting career, like I have switched between heels and flats. And I know previously when I went from heels back to flats, I felt really, really strong, because I think being in heels just forces me to stay on my quads and on my legs a little bit more, that when I then switch back to flats, I notice it even more. The only issue I have with heels versus flats is that with heels, I do feel a little bit more unstable on the walkout, or like the unrack, but that's something I can kind of get used to and adjust to. I just have to take it a little bit slower. So yeah, I went back into heels because it allows me to also have more control within the descent as well. Like I don't feel like I have to dive bomb to hit depth. And I actually adapted to them super quickly. Like by my 3rd squat session, I felt really comfortable, which my 3rd squat session was also on week 1 because I've added an extra squat day, which I'll break down in a second. Anyway, back to programming. So on a Tuesday, I need some kind of high intensity exposure. I also want to boost my confidence in the whole of the squat / leaving the whole of the squat and my control within my movement. So I added in a paused squat single. And in order to keep the intensity relatively high and also to boost my confidence ready for my primary squat day, that paused squat single is at my last warm up for my primary squat day on the Saturday. So for example, on week 1, my paused squat single was 155. My top single on the Saturday was 170. So I do a 15 kilo jump to my top set, providing things feel good. Obviously there is scope to adjust if things don't feel as good and I need to adjust, especially as the weeks go on in the block and things get heavier. But that is kind of how it's working for me. And then logically, I know that I can go into my Saturday session thinking, well, I paused 15 kilos less than this the other day and it moved fine, so I can hit this for a normal comp single. So that's what we're doing there, and so far I've really enjoyed doing the pause single. And then I've also just got back off 6s just to keep some volume in, and yeah, don't need to explain that part too much, that's not really much of a difference. Now I've also added an additional squat day. So on a Thursday now, I am doing a very light, low intensity squat day. It is tempo triples, so 5-second descent, 1 second pause, and then just obviously up as normal on my tempo squats for sets of 3 at 60%, which I have rounded up slightly because 60% for me is 117.5. I might as well just load 120. So I've been doing tempo triples 4x3 at 120 on that Thursday session, my tertiary squat day, I guess we should call it. And again, I've actually really enjoyed it. I'll go through the rest of that session as we kind of go through the video, but it's just been a really light, easy session, and I've added some accessories at the end as well, which also just makes it a little bit more enjoyable. And again, I'll go through that more in more detail, but it's like a low pressure, low intensity day that I've been really enjoying so far. Obviously, it kind of goes without saying, and you can probably guess that the reason it's also tempo is to force me into more control with that movement pattern, and it's light enough that it's not really inducing any excess fatigue, ready for my Saturday primary squats, which really haven't changed a lot at all, so I'm not going to break this down in too much detail because I have another meet coming up literally immediately. I've got 7 weeks. I'm doing a 4-week block into a 3-week block. I'm keeping singles in, so I've got a top single on my Saturday primary squat day, as I've already said. As long as warm-ups feel good, it's 15 kilos above whatever my paused single was. My last warm-up matches my paused single each week, and then I'll gauge from there where I think my top end strength is. And then I've got back off 4x4, and that's kind of how that squat day goes. So the Saturday session structure hasn't really changed too much in terms of squats, and to be honest, the overall weekly structure, although it is quite a lot of changes, it's nothing crazy, and so far I've been really enjoying it. Bench. Now, bench is the one lift that is still going up in comp quite regularly. Like, I've had a few really good meets now, like literally my last 3 meets, bench has felt fantastic. I managed to hit 115 at powering through a couple of weeks ago after a pretty horrible warning of hot bathing and spitting, and squats not going to plan. I still came out in bench 115 with plenty of room left as well. So really happy with how bench has been going. But I still felt like something needed to change with my bench because I am capable of much more than 115. And I'm not saying that from a place of arrogance or anything like that, or like false confidence. I'm saying that from a place of I have the muscle mass and the overall strength in my upper body, and I have the technique now as well. Like, my technique on bench is solid. I'm very confident in my positioning. I'm very confident in my use of leg drive. I should be benching more than 115. And like, I benched 120 touch and go a couple of years ago, and it was like, not terrible technique, but it wasn't great, and I still managed to hit 120 a couple of years ago. Like, there's no reason why that shouldn't be on the platform at this point, if not more. So I wanted to make a little bit of a change with bench. Now, historically, I've gotten away with just like 2 to 3 bench days a week. Like, it wasn't that long ago I introduced a 3rd bench day. I'm now up to 4 bench days, which obviously I'll break down in a second. But for a long time, I was making pretty good progress on bench simply from doing 2 kind of higher intensity, moderate volume, I would say, bench days, but my bench does respond well to more of like a higher intensity approach across the board for the most part. But I do feel like there is scope to try different things with my bench, and let me talk you through the changes I'm making. So I have 4 bench days a week now. So on a Tuesday, I have what I would call my secondary bench day. So I have 4x3, 2 count-ish, I've been a little bit lenient on those pauses, on bench, followed by 3x7 Larsen press. So I added in Larsen press volume quite a few blocks ago, and last block I ended up condensing things down onto this day, so I basically used to have an additional training day where I would do my Larsen press and deadlifts, where now my Tuesday is a full SPD day, and I've kind of condensed those into one day, but that's not the point. Anyway, with Larsen press, the reason I actually added that in a while ago was because historically I have made good progress adding in my volume being Larsen press. So like my feet down kind of comp style bench would be lower volume, higher intensity, and then my higher volume work would be Larsen press. But actually one of the main reasons I would do that is because I've had lower back issues in the past, and I still do get some lower back pain, particularly if I bench feet down too often. So in order to reduce irritation, I added in Larsen press, and I actually found I had a really good uptick with my bench. So I've kept that in on this day just to keep that additional volume in, and I don't want to make any changes on this training day because, like I say, things have been working really well. Mentioning my lower back, so my lower back's been feeling better recently. Like, I haven't noticed as many issues with bench. So what I've done to add in a little bit more comp bench volume, on my Thursday session, after my light tempo squats, I'm now doing 4x8 super light comp bench. So when I say super light, I mean week 1 was 60%, so 70 kilos for me that works out as, and each week I'm just adding 2.5 kilos. It's very low intensity, like sub RPE 6, probably sub RPE 5, like super, super light and comfortable. And I'm just doing this for like extra skill practice, a little bit of extra volume, and just to trial how my body is going to respond and hold up, especially my lower back, with that additional bench day, because if it all holds up and things keep feeling good, there's scope to potentially start pushing that a little bit more and playing around with that day a little bit more. So that's my Thursday bench day. On a Saturday, I have my priming bench. So I added this day in quite a few blocks ago now. I didn't really feel like my bench was showing up as it should on its primary day, and I think that was just because of the amount of rest days between my weekday benches and then my weekend like heavier bench. So I added in priming doubles, and I've literally just trialed 3x2 at 90 on this first block of doing priming bench, and it worked really well. So I just literally kept that in since. So on my Saturday session, it is just still 3 doubles at 90 kilos. 90 for me is light enough that it's not going to really induce any fatigue, but it's also just about heavy enough that if I don't take it seriously, it feels a bit harder, right? And it shouldn't feel like anything. It should feel like it's nothing on my chest. It should feel like I'm pressing nothing. So it holds me accountable. Being heavy enough, I have to really set up and take my positioning seriously, but it's not heavy enough that even if I slack off on my positioning, it's not going to induce any real fatigue. And then on a Sunday, we have my primary bench day, which is a top single. And then I used to do back off triples, where now I'm doing back off doubles, just to raise that load a little bit and get me used to slightly higher lows leading into comp. That's what I actually did going into British in November last year. And it worked really well. And my bench felt unbelievably strong that day. Apart from, if I didn't get called out on elbow depth, I think we'd have been good for a very sub-max 115 that day, potentially more. So yeah, that worked really well for me going into British. So I'm going to do that again going into this comp. Then obviously I'll reassess after. My flaring, like when I flare, I do feel strong, but it's just a bit too much strain on my shoulders, where I've been touching a little bit lower, but my elbow depth still looks really solid. So I'm going to just keep with this for now and see how we go. So that's the bench changes. Nothing crazy. Essentially, I've just added in an extra bench day that's just super light, just to see how we go, just to slowly increase my volume on bench, because I can bench big and I just need to figure out the key to doing that. Okay, so now we're going to talk through the problem child, which is obviously deadlifts. I've been struggling with my deadlift for way too long now, so I will preface this and say a big part of my issue with deadlifts is absolutely a mental block, because historically when I've had lower back issues, deadlifts have been the one that I either then can't push or my back has flared up mid-rep on deadlifts. Like, deadlifts are the ones that when I am hurt, it is them that suffer / them that make it worse. So I do think when I have to deadlift heavy, there is a little part in the back of my brain that's telling me to be careful because I'm going to hurt myself again, and obviously I don't want to do that. However, I have been healthy enough now for well over a year that I should not even be thinking about this anymore. Like, my back is fine, my body is healthy, like it's not an issue right now. And actually going into my last deadlift session that I did yesterday, which was relatively heavy, it was my week 3 SBD day on the Tuesday. I had a reasonably heavy top single yesterday, and going into that session, my back felt the worst it had in a while, and the session still went fine. And actually by the time my session had finished, my back felt absolutely fine, and today it feels absolutely fine. So I need to just kind of remember these details when it comes to deadlifting, that my back is healthy and I am fine. I just have to be confident. But a little bit of story time for when I was at comp. So at comp, after deadlifts, obviously they didn't go to plan, like squats and deadlifts both were just write-offs at comp. And I do think part of that again was by deadlifts, I'd kind of just felt defeated. Like, I'd hit my bench PB. Deadlifts were never going to be a PB day, so who really cares at this point was kind of my attitude, which isn't a good thing, but I'm being honest. I made a comment that I think I might actually give sumo like a proper try. And when I said it, I kind of meant after All Englands, because obviously I had another comp 7 weeks apart. Like, that's not long enough to learn sumo and master it. Zuko just kicked my tripod. And I got a response of, you've had one bad deadlift meet, or like, you've had one bad meet, why are you going to change your whole technique up? And I was like, I've had more than one bad meet now. Like, at British, my deadlift did show up, to be fair. At British, I only needed 187.5 to secure third. I had at least 5 more kilos on that, if not more, and I felt pretty confident in that on the day. But Commonwealth, I failed 187, and the comp just gone, I failed 187, and I should not be failing 187 at this point. Like, my body is the strongest it's ever been. Like, fair enough, no, my deadlifts aren't particularly showing up in training, but after a taper, 190 plus should be absolutely doable without much stress or without much panic. Like, and it's not. And so part of me thought, well, maybe I need to give sumo like a real try, because I did briefly try it probably about a year, 18 months ago, but I wasn't patient enough and I didn't really dedicate myself to it. So fast forwarding to now, I have added sumo into my program. It is on a Saturday, so it's at the end of my primary squats and my priming bench day. I've added in sumo. So I've just added in some ascending sets of 4. Super light. Like, on week 1, the heaviest I went was 120. The week just gone, week 2, I went up to 130. This week I'm going to go up to 135, and then next week I'll probably do a top set of 4 at 140, all ascending sets. I really love using ascending sets when I'm introducing a new movement or an additional day or like an additional exposure to something, because I think it's a really good way to get lots of skill practice in at fairly light loads and just see how it feels and see how things go, see how your body responds. And then obviously if everything feels good, you can then maybe like a top set, back off system or straight sets in the following blocks. But usually I do like 1 or 2 sets of ascending work with my clients when we add in like an additional squat day, for example, because I think it's just a really nice way to introduce things. So I'm doing ascending sumo, and I can't lie, it actually feels pretty good. Now, when I say ascending sumo, I got my boyfriend to come sit with me. So Zuko wanted to go in the garden when I was deadlifting on the first week. And I was like, look, he can come outside, but you're going to have to sit with him because all he's going to want to do is just come and disrupt me in the garage, which is exactly what he did. So my boyfriend sat at the other end of the garage with Zuko, and I did my sumo set, and it was like my second to last set. And I was like, oh, how does it look? And my boyfriend was like, you can't call that sumo. Like, he doesn't powerlift. Like, but because I'm such a narrow stance, like I'm kind of doing like a frog stance, I guess is the best way to describe it, like kind of like a mix between the two. But it felt good. Like my hips aren't built for super wide sumo. And don't get me wrong, when I was younger, I did pull sumo and I had a fairly wide stance. But I was a lot younger then. I was a lot more nimble. I'm not like that anymore. I'm kind of just treating it as a secondary, like complementary day right now. Like I'm not planning on switching to sumo permanently. And if I do make that choice, it will be after the English when I've had more time to really hone in and address things. But it feels good. Like I feel like I'm really getting work through my legs. Like I had leg DOMs after my week 2 sumo session. Obviously I had squats and stuff before, but normally I wouldn't get DOMs in my legs just from squats on that Saturday session on week 2. But from adding in that sumo, like it did feel good. The only thing I'm struggling with sumo, which I struggled with on my week 2, my week 1 was light enough I didn't really notice it. But I am struggling with my bracing and to get in a good position and like hold my brace and things. So that's something I really need to work on, and I do need to just continue to be really patient with sumo, which is not my strong suit. But I am just reminding myself from week to week that I need to just go in patient and take my time. Like I've booked out my training in my calendar, which is something I'll talk about in a bit, but by doing that, it means I don't have to rush when I'm training. Like I know that this is my training time and it's really helping, which to be fair, I probably don't need to say much more than that. Anyway, so with sumo, the only thing I'm really struggling with is my bracing. And I did notice after week 2 of sumo, I had quite a big lower back pump when I finished the session, which obviously isn't ideal. And then the following days, I was a little bit worried that my back wasn't particularly great and it was going to start going downhill a little bit, which then led me to going into my deadlift session that I actually did yesterday, which was my week 3 Tuesday session. I was really nervous going in that my back was going to go on deadlifts or something, which it didn't, which means I can put that all behind me and just like my back felt better by the end of that session than it did going in, so that's a good sign. But yeah, essentially sumo is feeling decent. Obviously it's not feeling super strong right now, but I've literally not done it in God knows how long, and it's something completely new. But one thing I would say as well is I feel just as strong on the first really light set as I do on the final set, which is like a 30 kilo difference. So the fact they feel pretty much identical is a good sign, but again, it's not high enough exposures at this point or heavy enough exposures to really be able to tell much. But I'm just gonna keep chipping away with it, and it's just a secondary variation for me to be doing, and hopefully it'll help my conventional as well. Okay, so conventional deadlifts, to be fair, bearing in mind they are the worst of my lifts right now, haven't really changed too much, but only because it's only really been a couple of blocks since I adapted things, so I just want to give it a little bit longer to see how things go. So I've got a top single on my Tuesday session, so I do my primary deadlifts at the end of my secondary squats and bench. So I've got a top single, back off triple, and then 2x5, and the 2x5 is super light and comfortable. So for example, my week 1 numbers, I had a top single at 155, a back off triple at 140, and then 2x5 at 125. So nice and light for those 2x5. And I'm just trialing that for now, and we'll see how that goes. But I was looking back at previous data, and I do always look back at things. Like I know where I've said I haven't obviously kept a log of my training for the last few years, but I know historically what I was doing and when, and actually like looking back at my old content, which is why I'm so glad I document things, I can just see from that what I was doing and when. And actually when I pulled 190 for the first time and when my deadlift was on a bit of an uptick, it was when I was doing super low volume but high intensity. So after my back flared up, I can't remember how long ago now, it was over 2 years ago now, I think. And it was when I was still training at my parents regularly. When I pulled 190 for the first time, I was literally just doing cluster singles. Like I was doing 3x1 with a minute's rest. And then the final week of the block, it was actually the day our last family dog died from when I was growing up. Like we had a pack of 4 huskies when I was growing up, and the last one died, and I went into that training session. It was the final week of the block. I was meant to do 3x1 at like 180, but I just kind of thought fuck it and loaded up a PB at 190. And I remember, like, obviously part of that was that I mentally just didn't give a shit, so I just went for it anyway. And that's where I know I definitely got a mental block, but also that low volume, high intensity did really work well for my deadlift. And I do think there is scope for me to go back to that. And actually looking back at the block kind of since that period of time, like since my back's been healthier, where I have been gradually increasing the volume and stuff, my deadlift's not really responded too well, or like, well, it hasn't really responded at all, like it's just kind of stagnated. Granted, I've been pushing my squat like crazy, which will have obviously had some kind of interference with my deadlift, but I do think if this doesn't work with my conventional, I am going to go with a slightly more unconventional method of incredibly low volume, just higher intensity, just basically cluster sets, probably just cluster singles, and see how that goes is kind of the plan. But for now, I'm going to keep things as they are, give it another try, because this is similar structure to what I did into the British after Commonwealth, and this worked really well, or at least pretty well. Like my deadlift showed up at British, not that I particularly needed it. So I'm just going to give this another go, see how we get on, and then, yeah, if I think after another couple of blocks after the English that it's still not really showing up or progressing as I need it to, then I will maybe just try cluster singles again and just see how we go with that. But that's kind of where we are now. And I think the only thing left to talk through is accessories. So I really felt like I lost a sense of self going into comp, and I think a big part of it was that I just wasn't able to push my accessories quite the same, or I wasn't pushing them quite the same. I discovered that I need accessories to feel like myself. I got into powerlifting because I was training with bodybuilders and the PTs at the gym I worked at who were bodybuilders who loved to push their training. They were heavy lifting, pushing everything to failure, drop sets, like proper bro training. And that's how I discovered I was strong, and that's how I learned to train, and I loved it, and I still love it to this day, but obviously I have to be sensible and do whatever I do to complement my SBD. So since comp, I've essentially just been broing out on my accessories. So on a Sunday, I'm not going to go through all of my accessories. On a Sunday, after my primary bench, I go to the gym with my boyfriend. He joins in and we do a full body accessory day. And then on a Tuesday, after my SBD, I do some upper movements just on the cable machine at home, essentially just pull down and rows. And then on a Thursday, we are also doing some leg movements at the gym as well. Doing just like hamstring curl, leg extension, abductor, adductor machines, like literally just machine movements as well, just get a little bit more leg work in. And that is kind of my accessory week. But what I'm doing, especially on that Sunday, is I'm fully pushing everything. And I think the main thing I've done differently as well is I've added leg press back in. So I did take leg press out approximately 8 weeks out of comp. And to be honest, the main reason for that is because we were in the gym and it was like the week one of the block and we couldn't get on it. Like we literally couldn't get on it. There's one decent leg press in the gym we go to. There's also a pendulum and a hack squat, and they were both in use as well. And literally for our entire full body session, we kept looking over and we just couldn't get on it. We waited for a little while at the end and it was just still not free. So I was like, you know what? Maybe this is a sign. Like I know there's other coaches out there and lifters that take out things like leg press near a comp, or at least stop pushing them to let their squat show up. Like some coaches say you shouldn't even put them in the program, which I don't really agree with. Obviously, like I love leg press. Most of my clients have some kind of variation of a leg press, hack squat, pendulum, that sort of thing. But they take it out essentially to let the squat show up to just reduce that extra fatigue. So I was like, you know what? I'll try it. I'll see. We won't do leg press again until after comp. I actually think taking leg press out is part of what caused that weakness I was talking about earlier. I think it's partly the fact that I was dive bombing my squat and my rigs were just taking over for me. And I think the other part is the fact that I took leg press out because as I was doing it the other day, I really felt that weakness. But I also knew as I was doing the movement that this is exactly what I've been missing. And just, I'm not going to go into crazy detail here, but basically broing out on my accessories and pushing my lifts. When I left the gym like Sunday on week 2, like I'd really, week 1 I was still kind of adjusting, but week 2 I really pushed hard and I felt so good after, and I felt like myself again. I was actually saying this to my boyfriend yesterday, like I went into yesterday's SBD day, so week 3 SBD on the Tuesday. My body was still sore from those Sunday accessories, but I felt so good just going into my session, being a little bit sore, still getting everything done. And I just feel more like myself again, like my identity and stuff within powerlifting and within the gym, not even within powerlifting, just within the gym. Like I am a bit of a bro lifter. I'm an ego lifter. That's how I found powerlifting. Like that's how I found that I was strong. And I need that in my program somewhere. And I just think taking that out from my accessories is part of also what will have caused me to burn out, because I just felt like I wasn't pushing as hard. And don't get me wrong, I was still pushing my upper accessories, but I just didn't quite feel the same taking some of these out and just taking things a little bit easier. Like the 2 weeks leading into comp, I really pulled my accessories back. And then on the week of comp, I basically did none. Like I did a little bit of back work, but it was super sub-max just to get some blood flow. And I missed it. As soon as I added it back in and as soon as I was pushing myself on them again, I felt like myself and I just feel really good in myself again. And basically accessories are here to stay and I need to remember that. And I just, yeah, that's kind of all I have to say. I bet a lot of these changes are essentially just because I was feeling burnt out and I needed something a little bit different. Obviously the overall structure of my week hasn't changed massively. Like there's not tons of changes. Like there's only so many changes you can make within a powerlifting program anyway. But I'm still doing 4 days. It's just slightly different looking 4 days. And I'm really happy with the split I've currently got. Like I said, I've just started week 3 and I'm really enjoying myself. So far, all my lifts are feeling good. Everything's feeling strong. My body's feeling healthy. And I'm excited to just see what happens here. And I think we're on the right tracks for a nice PB total, even if I don't necessarily have all 3 lifts show up at the English. As long as I know I'm on track to get everything where it needs to be ready for British in December, that is a success. I think the only other thing to say that I'm also doing a little bit differently is I'm not documenting my training in quite as much detail, at least just for now. I think mentally I need a little bit of a break from constant YouTube videos. So I'm still going to upload weekly, but it's not going to be training vlogs of my entire week. I might just do like one session out of the week or just slightly different structure of videos. I'm still going to be uploading, but it's just gonna be a little bit different because I've really enjoyed like the last few sessions. I've not really been taking my camera out with me. Obviously I still film like at least some of my work on my phone, so I can still put some videos in of what I'm doing. But that is one slight change as well that I'm gonna be making, is just not documenting in quite as much detail what's going on, at least until the English. I just think it'll be much better for me mentally. But I'm not gonna hide my training. I'm still gonna show you guys the main bits. It just won't be recorded. Like the videos might not be quite as long and stuff like that. But that is all I've got to say. If you've made it to the end, I really appreciate it. Let me know if you have any questions down below, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.